We're learning new details about one of those deadly strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. Sources tell CNN the U.S. military carried out a follow-up strike to this September 2nd attack after having reason to believe there were survivors in the water. Now, the sources say that prior to the strike, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had ordered the military to ensure everyone on board was killed. It's not clear if Hegseth knew there were survivors prior to the second attack. People briefed on the, quote, double tap strike say they're concerned that it could violate the law of armed conflict, which prohibits killing an enemy combatant who is taken out of the fight due to injury or surrender. Now, since September, the U.S. military has carried out at least 21 known strikes on suspected drug trafficking boats, killing at least 83 people. And these developments are happening as President Trump says the U.S. military will soon expand its campaign to Venezuelan soil. I'm joined now by retired Navy Admiral James Stavridis, a CNN senior military analyst. He's also a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and now Vice Chairman of Carlyle, an international investment firm. Also, by the way, got to get the whole resume here, also served as a commander of the U.S. Southern Command. Thank you for being here. I guess I just want to start with what concerns you about this double tap boat strike here?
Well, first, as a number of international law experts have said, this raises real questions of is this permissible under the laws of war? Generally speaking, when you have knocked an opponent down, you have sunk their ship, for example, and they're floating around in the water, they obviously pose no threat. The technical term is their hors de combat. And so at that point, you have a requirement to rescue them. And in fact, interestingly, in a subsequent boat strike, this administration did in fact rescue 2 survivors and return them to their home country. So it's unclear to me, Omar, why we took this step. And I think it does indicate a need to take a hard look at exactly what happened in that first strike. Second point to conclude, from an intelligence perspective, I really question killing these survivors. Why not capture them, interrogate them, use the information you get to drop a plumb line back to Nicolas Maduro? That would be a more effective thing to do. So I think if these reports are true, I think they raise questions both of laws of war and on efficacy and intelligence gathering.
Well, you know, another aspect of this is President Trump suggested yesterday that the United States is preparing to take new action against alleged drug traffickers that could include strikes on land that would be starting, quote, very soon, to use his words. I just wonder what you make of the implications there and what could that sort of land threshold being crossed actually look like here?
Let's start with the physical size of Venezuela. It's a big country. It's twice the size of California. Got a population kind of 35 million plus, not unlike size-wise Afghanistan or Iraq. So big country, big population. Putting boots on the ground strikes me as a bad idea. You'd need a lot more than the 15,000 troops or so that we have floating off the coast right now. So when President Trump says we're going to do land operations or land strikes, I hope what he means is to use air power, drones, Tomahawk missiles, manned aircraft if necessary, to go after drug-related targets ashore. I hope that's what he's talking about, not putting boots on the ground. I think the latter would be a very questionable enterprise.
But even in the, if it's a drone strike or other sort of unmanned aerial vehicle or something like that, I mean, are there wider implications for carrying out strikes like that on Venezuelan soil as opposed to some of these boats that are, you know, off the coast, perhaps in international waters? How does that change sort of the, I guess, threat assessment or I guess the calculation of damage in a situation like this?
Using the logic the administration has purported, which is that this is an act of war, the launching of drugs from Venezuela toward the United States. At that stage, you are, again, this is the Trump administration's analysis, not my own, but you are conducting combat operations. That's what is justifying the strikes and the sinking of the boats. When you take it ashore, Omar, it does raise it to another level. You're now doing this not in international waters, but on sovereign territory of another state. But if you follow the logic of what the Trump administration has laid out, it's merely the next move on the anti-narcotic chessboard. Where this would begin to get very difficult to assess is if you took kind of the next step and put boots on the ground. You've got U.S. troops involved in combat. Venezuela has a pretty big army, about 65,000. They have a huge militia, several 100,000. Boots on the ground would be a real challenge and beyond the capacity of what's offshore. So I don't look for that, but I do think some strikes are coming, and the Trump administration will continue the logic that we're in a combat situation defending ourselves from drugs coming toward us.
Admiral James Stavridis, appreciate the perspective. Thanks for being here.
You bet.